Samantha, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me. It's a beautiful day in Tennessee. We've had a lot of rain over the last couple of days, but you were telling me you're on your screened-in porch, your home office, and you're enjoying the weather, I imagine, right now.
Yes, this is what I'll call my office extension.
I do
So,
the same thing. The audience has kind of gotten used to this view. I've always wanted to kind of change it up a little bit so it's not just this antique Jackson press in the background, but
you
alas,
should still add space for your wall.
I probably should. Well, gosh, everyone I talk to in an interview, I like to talk about how we got to know each other. So you and I have known each other for quite a few years, right?
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned that, I'm trying to
It's
remember
been a while.
where it all began.
I would say just
Where?
networking in general. You know, you are a pretty active
Yeah,
networker, for sure. I know I was too back in the day. And so I imagine it
yeah,
was just through a variety of networking sources.
very likely. I'm sure that's what it is exactly. That's kind of always been part of my job is outreach and
Yeah,
engaging with community. So yeah,
right. And so, if I remember correctly, you were at King College when we met. You were sort of doing their outreach because they had just kicked off their new location off of Hardin Valley. Is that right?
yes, yes, back in 2010.
Yeah. So, okay. So that would mean at least 7 years we've known each other. So there you
Yeah,
go. And you've moved on to different things, and we'll definitely talk about Origami Day here in just a little bit, and in your first foray, as far as I know, into the startup world. But maybe for context, you could give the audience an idea on your background, sort of education and interests and jobs and those type things.
yeah. Well, I'll add a little life to that. My dad was in the army. We moved
Awesome.
every year when I was growing up, so change is my comfort zone. I moved to Knoxville to go to the University of Tennessee. It was warmer and cheaper than the Chicago area where I had just come from, so decided to stay. Started out communication was my degree. Actually, technically public advertising with a concentration in public relations and a business minor.
Okay.
And my first job out of school was for a video production company, and they hired me to work at the front desk. And I got promoted to business development, and then that began a career of ad agencies, production companies. I worked with King for a very long time doing community outreach for the adult programs, and also ended up having a job at a nationwide company based in Knoxville doing their public relations and e-commerce. So I've had a hand in a lot of different things, and during a good chunk of that, I've worked part time at a gym doing wellness and personal training.
Mm,
So lots of different stuff there.
lots of different stuff. Well, let's go with the wellness for just a minute. So I'm curious where your interest there comes.
So about 11 years ago, yep, 11 years ago in August, I jumped off a cliff and broke my back.
Ugh.
And it prompted me to have to move all the time. The job at the production company was really hard for me because I sat a lot.
Hmm.
And pretty much I discovered that movement was what my body needed. And that's actually part of the reason that I started my own business as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. Let's talk some more about that. But just quickly, if you don't know Jessica Harthcock, she was on season one, if I remember correctly, with Utilize Health out of Nashville. And she has a similar story to where she
Mm-hmm.
was a gymnast and was doing a routine and did the same thing and injured herself and figured out how to sort of rehabilitate herself. And that led to her business model. So it sounds like a little bit of the need to address issues like that led you to entrepreneurship. What about those things that you've been involved with? Because they're sort of different, right? I mean, you've got business development and PR and advertising. They definitely have some
Mm-hmm.
commonalities too. From what I have known you, just an outgoing personality. Is that what led you into those type of careers at the time, or what is it you think led you in that early path?
Are you familiar with the Gallup Strengths Finder?
Yes, absolutely.
So once I did that, I it all is clear now.
It just clicked
So
for you.
well, yeah, so I actually think what has led me to those things is the things within me that I can't control. And of my top five strengths, two groups are usually opposites on the spectrum. So I have both strategic and ideation.
Mm,
And so I think I just live in both parts of my brain, maybe. And so things like creative industry or really marketing and advertising and PR, it's all like really riding that line of
mm-hmm.
creativity and organization. So I really think those are just innate in me. Those are careers that I absolutely belong in
How,
or
how,
have belonged.
Yeah, it makes sense. How long ago do you remember when did you do the strengths finders before you were while you were in college and coming out, or roughly when did you do that?
No, I actually did it It was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So
Okay.
I was already pretty deep into my career, but I also did a course at UT that was designed to help you understand careers and majors. And we did a lot of similar assessments. And it actually moved me from a degree in pre-veterinary studies
Ah,
into public relations. So I started out doing pre-veterinary studies, then went into PR with the thought that I might go to law school, then
mm,
decided I would rather just be done and work in the creative industry. So
sure.
yeah,
Sure. And the interesting thing, just talking about this with you, is that those skill sets apply a lot to the startup world.
I
So,
would agree.
yeah, so I think it's a great chance just to segue into that. Those things, that business development side, marketing, creativity, but strategy as well. Is Origami Day your first startup, or did you do something prior to it?
Let's say officially, yes,
Okay.
but I have realized I recently was talking about side hustles. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow on managing a side hustle.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking about when did my side hustles first begin? And I actually technically started a business, but not officially ever. Um, right after I graduated from UT, my dog, I got this precious dog who's actually like breathing heavily outside the door.
Okay.
But she loved other dogs. And so I started a business where I would pretty much watch other people's dogs in my home just so she had companions and dogs to be with. So that was probably technically my first business. I called it Friends with Lily because her name is Lily.
All right.
Uh, and did that for a little bit. And then, professionally, other things took off. I didn't have the capacity to really care for other people's dogs that much. But so well, let's say officially Origami Day is my first business, but I had my hand in entrepreneurship, I think, for a long time, talking about things that are innate. I think I've always been an entrepreneur.
Okay, that was my next question, is if you feel like this has sort of already always been part of you, because we've had some guests who say, no, I had no idea I was ever going to go down this route. Next thing I know, I was in it. And they have others who say, no, I've pretty much known this is me, and it's just been a matter of time till where I get to the place that I am now. So you feel like, where does that come from? Is that just your personality driving that? Did you have entrepreneurship around you when you were younger? Or where does that come from?
I don't know. And I don't even know that it's something where I sat down at one point and thought this is what I'm going to do. I think it's more that steps happen and things happen and then suddenly it feels right. And as a usually someone who's very logical, it's weird to say like things feel right, but I'm also a big believer in trusting your gut. And
Yeah.
there have been times where even just at each day with my business, I move forward and it just feels like it's what I'm supposed to do. So I don't know where it began. I don't know how I know, but it's what I'm supposed to do.
Well, the good news is you're not alone. That's also a common story from people, is they just talk about this idea of they just sort of end up in it one day, and next thing you know,
Yeah.
they're going along. Well, why don't we talk about the current startup Origami Day? I mean, tell us a little bit about sort of how it came to fruition, and explain maybe a bit about what it does or is.
Yeah. So we've kind of already touched on I'm often juggling a lot of different plates, and that's probably why I made a time management business. So in a nutshell, Origami Day is to help people manage their time, but not so we can do more, but so we can have more life balance. Because it's very easy, and it was very easy for me to go down this road of taking on too much and forgetting why we're really here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a 1% person where like if there's a 1% chance of something happening, it'll happen to me. So outside of breaking my back, I had a crazy health incident 3 or 4 years ago, and it caused me to really reprioritize
Mm.
and realize that life is short and we have no promises, and we are put here for different reasons, but I don't think a lot of those reasons are to just jump into a cog and live this 9 to 5 lifestyle of, deferred life, as many
Yes.
people will say.
Yeah.
And
No.
so,
Great way to put it. Great
yeah,
phrase. Deferred life.
a lot of that all hit me at the same time. And I said, I'm done. And so I started using a product, and it was just a piece of paper, folding paper that I used to help manage my time and keep my balance. And that is now my flagship product. And my business is pretty much that product, an annual planner that I'm hoping to get a short run out by the end of the year,
Okay.
and then workshops and other consulting just to help people hear the other side of it and have someone else say, keep the balance, say no, create your boundaries, all the things we need to hear to manage our time better. So it's not just planners, but it is time management tools, but with so much more.
And did you find in your own experience, so obviously what you did was sort of solve your own pain point at the time and found out that, so did you get some validation along the way from other people? Were you telling people this same kind of message of, I'm tired of deferred life and I want to kind of, be more deliberate about the decisions that I make? Did you find that you were sharing that story after your experience and other people said, oh, me too, and that led you to, well, I should turn this into a business besides
Yes.
just doing it for myself?
And I honestly began to lose count of the people who just said to me, you should make this a business.
Uh-huh.
And so it was a little bit of that definitely validation is the right word. And people using the product. I mean, even now there are people who are using the product regularly that have been using it since before it was actually an official product.
Yeah.
So they're using old versions of it and making their own and things like that. So yeah, there was a lot of do this, a lot of validation, a lot of people asking for it. And even still every day talking about knowing this is what I'm supposed to do. Every day I get further validation that there's a need for this and there's support around it.
Yeah, I would even, continue to validate it even just myself. I know we haven't had much of a chance to talk about it, just seeing each other in passing. But I mean, I have a similar story. I went through a health issue 4 or 5 years ago, and I came out of it, and I went, "This is ridiculous. I'm killing myself. For what? Yeah. For more stuff and more things, and American dream, right? And chasing after all these things." And you knew me in the banking days and great career in industry, but I made a deliberate decision to sort of get away from that, and it was it doesn't mean I won't ever go back to it, but it was a great decision. It just allowed me to focus more, as you said, on what mattered. I'm curious for you. It sounds like you sort of started out with this idea of I don't want to pigeonhole the solution at all, but it sounds a little bit like journaling. I'm sure it's a lot different when somebody sees an example. We'll be sure to tag the website and stuff like that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like just this idea of putting your thoughts down on paper to help manage your time and those type things. Was that a early thing that you did yourself to sort of get it out of here on paper, organize a little bit more, and even force you to look at it and say, geez, I just said that?
Well, and it was less of journaling, because journaling to me, my first thought when I hear journaling is, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
So really what it was simplification. When you look at what's on the market right now for time management, it's very busy and it's very cluttered. And even there's just so much. And a busy person, at least me, I was like, I don't have time for that. Like, that is not at all what works. Furthermore, for females, the options for a calendar or a planner or even a notepad to bring into a meeting. I don't need kittens and unicorns on my planner. I would like to, be a respectful, professional female, and have something that is simple and refined. And so that is really what bred my business, was to your point of, I've solved my own pain point because what I wanted didn't exist. And so it's less, I guess, again, there could be a journaling component to it, because part of what I created is something that people can personalize and work for what they need.
Okay.
For example, my husband and I both use my products. I'm an entrepreneur and he's a firefighter. So we've got the blue collar, we got the white collar, and it works for both. And I've had people even tweak my primary product that I use as a daily agenda. My old boss at King, she uses it for tasks. So there's a lot of tweaking and opportunity to change what people need, but it is very simple, streamlined, get it all in one place, because we have too much right now, way too much of a lot.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I'm curious, how has the model evolved over time? Because I know you went through, oh gosh, help me out here. Did you do the startup? You presented it.
I did What's the Big Idea.
You did What's the Big Idea, right? So in Knoxville, the What's the Big Idea competition. And you did that. I remember seeing you present that there. How has the solution changed from sort of when you were doing it, solving your own pain point, to going through some of the exercises that I know they put you guys through, because we did it back in 2010.
Yeah, and it's an excellent thing. And I will tell anyone who is in the Knoxville area who has an idea that is worth applying. And I did it kind of on a whim and thought, oh, I'll take time to start my business, and then got accepted into What's the Big Idea. And my business, I literally went in with a folding piece of paper and a Gmail account and came out with an entirely different business name, a new website, like all the licenses and permits and things that I needed. And it was wild, but it was excellent. But one of the biggest things that changed really was just my delivery method.
Okay.
Because of my background in retail when I was younger, and then doing corporate communication for a retail chain, one of the things that I was comfortable with was selling my product, e-commerce and retail. But what I learned about my demographic and about different options is that my demographic is busy and there's a lot of value in subscription boxes right now.
Oh,
So
yes.
I sort of added a layer of delivery. So sure, there's some retail component, there's e-commerce, but now I'm working on getting it to a point of you click a button and it's going to come to you.
Interesting.
So
So,
that was one of the bigger changes, was just the distribution of it and the name. It started out as organizational origami, and I mean, you can probably tell why I changed that.
sure. Sure. Well, that's an interesting thought on the subscription side. So is that the big focus for the business model right now?
um, ish.
Ish.
So I, I think there's probably different stages of startups, and I'm in the stage right now where everything's muddy and everything's on fire,
Yes.
and um, my focus is just do one thing each day that moves the business forward, and that's good enough. Some days
Absolutely.
I get to do 20 things, and but there's never a day I do nothing. So so when you say focus, I'd love to think that I have a focus, but there's also it's
It's
that's just not where I
constantly
am.
constantly in motion,
Yeah,
and I think that's a fair point. That I always, the listeners know this. I'll pause when I think there's a very important point that was just made, and I think they need to hear that. Is that you're right? There's definitely stages of startups, and usually you feel like this is my solution. This is exactly what it looks like, and then as you start to go through things change, and you go, oh, I learned
yeah,
more. That's changing. I'm going to shift over here a little bit. I'm going to focus on this. So I think it's awesome that you're willing to recognize and put it out there that it gets a little muddy sometimes and you just have to work through that. And it's a great suggestion to do it one thing at a time. You're hearing a consistent message there just with focus and simplicity and things like that.
yeah.
Um,
And I'm doing a lot of reframing, because what sort of life would I be living if while I was doing this? There's a lot that goes into a startup, but if I'm not living my life while I'm doing it, then I'm not doing what I'm trying to tell other people to do. So, you know, there's days where I'm willing to work hard and put in a 10 or 12-hour day if that's what needs to happen, but not ever at the risk of losing a beautiful walk with my dogs and my husband, or
yeah,
going to dinner with friends. So I'm keeping that balance. And if it means my business grows slower or grows differently, then I'm okay with that, because I do still feel like I'm moving forward every day.
yeah, no, I'd like to stay there for a second too, Samantha, because I think that is important for everybody here. I mean, there's so much out in the media about the grind and the hustle and
Yeah.
24/7, and I
Yeah.
get it. I get where that message comes from. I think if you boiled it down, what they're trying to say is you got to really just stay after it and be consistent and just keep going. But I think this idea that entrepreneurship and startups mean that you are, sleeping on a couch, working 18 hours a day in front of a laptop and getting out of your chair to have
Right.
lunch. I think that's a really bad message we're putting out there for
I
everyone.
agree.
And unfortunately, it's sort of been created into the sort of the sexy image of the startup life, and I think that's why a lot of people move toward it, and then they find out that they're not living their life at all. Is it? How do you keep that perspective? Maybe it's partly what Origami Day does for you in your organization. How are you keeping that perspective as you go through it?
I don't know if it was learned or if it's innate, but there is a part of me that is a little bit of a nonconformist. So I don't like to do things just because it's the way they're supposed to be done. I like to do things that feel right for me. And sometimes that's not what everyone else is doing, or it's what people expect for me to do. And I'm also a big person of faith, and so I feel that my actions sometimes are um, they're sometimes validated through my faith, through things I see, things I experience. I joke all the time that one day I'll write a memoir called "Proof That God Loves Me," and it will be because of these little things that end up falling into place and kind of validate for me. That was the right choice at the right time. That was a good boundary to create. But it's not easy either. And I only recently was able to change jobs entirely to put more effort into Origami Day, and I'd love it if that was my only job, but that's a long time away, if ever. I mean, maybe one day, but I say all that to say part of that entrepreneur um, world is you do have to find ways to make it work. So you're not, this all the time working, sleeping on a couch, not living your life. I don't know if I answered
No,
your
you did.
question in
It's
that
it's
one.
it's what people need to hear. I mean, it's not again, it's back to this image of, well, you just, I'll tell a quick story if I can. Go
Yeah.
grab when you were a member of Go Grab Lunch and we appreciated the support back then. I remember people telling me, you guys are going to have to quit your full-time jobs. All three founders have to quit their jobs. That was some of the advice our mentors gave us. Well, not to get too specific, but we all had very established careers.
Yeah.
And that would have, I looked at one of the mentors and I said, you're basically suggesting we should go into bankruptcy. That's what you're basically suggesting. Because we all
Yeah.
had families and well-established careers and all these things. And so again, I get the idea of focus on the startup to really grow it, but I love your message of you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. You can have your startup and grow it one thing at a time, one day at a time, while you still go about your life and still are working a job and things like that. I think I think that's something people need to probably do more often. I'm a huge fan of a plan B or a side hustle, and then growing it to a point to when you can finally go, okay, that's it. Now I'll do this full time. So I think it's great
Yes.
that you share that with other people. And it might, you're right. It might just be the nonconformist in you that says,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do
Well,
this.
with with that, and if I can bring up a point that I
Yeah.
think is important for anyone who is not a solo person anymore. I got married a long time ago, and it was still one of the best decisions of my life. Um, but because I made a good choice, that makes my business more successful because it's not just me making these decisions on what's best for me, just as one person. It's what is best for my household, for my husband's best interests, and thankfully he's supportive because he sees the value, and like I said, he uses the product,
Yep.
so he knows it's helpful and useful. But that is really key, I think, to that transition of growing a startup is understanding that it affects more than you sometimes if your world is more than just you. And I think that's a tough part for some people is how do they make that work. But thankfully that's not been an issue for me yet. Besides, if I feel guilty asking him like, hey, can we spend several $100s on these prototypes?
Yeah.
But,
Yep. Well, it is definitely, that's another thing for people to be thinking about, and great advice is just, it's not just you, especially when you're in a relationship or kids and things
mhm.
like that. So I think the message people need to be hearing from you is to balance things, to really balance it, to balance that pursuit, but also keep your life in some relative comfort. Curious for you, what's been the hardest part of this whole journey, of the entrepreneurship journey, especially with this company? What's been the toughest thing for you at this stage? Or has there been
Uh,
any?
I mean, there's definitely things that are tough. I'm trying to think if one thing stands out. I'll tell you, even though there have been things that have been tough, there is an overwhelming sense of peace and joy. It's really like I love doing the things for my business. The toughest part would be that that to balance my business and my physical health and my emotional health, I kind of am a cobbler of jobs. So I have Origami Day, that as a startup is your typical, it's not my moneymaker.
Right,
So then I have two other jobs, the one at the gym that's keeping me moving, which is important for my body and my health.
right.
But then I also need another one that just helps me to pay my bills. So that was a tough thing to really find that balance. And then there's the daily struggle of, and I should find it as a compliment, but the employers want more from me, and I have to keep those boundaries, and I have
Right.
to say no because sometimes the hardest thing is resources, the same resources that every entrepreneur hears, time and money,
Hmm.
and that is really what it boils down to. So I'd like to think that I'm different than every entrepreneur in that way, but I'm not. I think the hardest things have been time and money.
It always is. And
Yeah.
I think, do you mitigate that back to, I hate to go back to the same message, but do you mitigate that by one step at a time, one focus at a time, working on it when I can, time wise, putting money into it when I can, just kind of, again, balancing that whole thing?
Yes, but I also part of the foundation of my business and what I tell people to do is to make a plan because we're more productive when we can create a plan. So I actually plan out my time.
Ah,
Today, after we're done, I will work out my plan for next Monday through Sunday. And there's always room for change and things shift. But I know when my blocks of this job happen and my blocks of this job and my blocks of Origami Day. So I have a good idea of when making sure that I'm keeping that balance of the right amount of hours or tasks for each bucket, if you will.
so
Um,
you're specifically scheduling chunks of time on your calendar that far in advance. I guess that's part of the process to just kind of block it off, recognizing that it could shift a little bit, but you probably, I'm guessing, do you try and stick to it as best you can?
Yeah, and usually it's groups. It's like a chunk of time.
Hmm.
So those will shift a little bit, but it's um I'm big on batching and grouping. So here's a
Absolutely.
chunk of work for the gym is all going to happen here. Here's a chunk of work for origami day and doing it like that. And that helps me. But there's also the constant, my phone's probably buzzed 1,000 times since we've been sitting here, and it's going to be for every one of the jobs, probably. So there's just that, you can do so only do so much, but if you try to be strategic and intentional with your time, then you can get a lot more done and you can have those boundaries. Because I try very hard to not work on the weekend.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Makes sense.
or if I'm working, it's things like looking on Pinterest for time management tips or finding good content on social media. So it's things that are lower stress and it doesn't feel as much like work on a Sunday.
Absolutely. That's a great suggestion too. So the toughest part's been that whole balance side. You may have alluded to it earlier. What's been the best part of being an entrepreneur? Is it that scratching that creative itch?
That one's tough. There's so much of it that I'm loving. One of the things I love the most is I've mentioned already, my husband's a firefighter, so he'll go to work for 24 hours at a time, and it will kill me. It would kill me in my other jobs when I wouldn't see him for 48 hours
Yeah.
between my schedule and his schedule, and that just got hard. And that goes back to like, why are we here? And I had family come into town a few months ago, and being able to shift my schedule and spend time with them. The best thing is probably that I actually feel like I'm living my life.
Ah,
Um,
the
and there may be
flexibility.
times, yeah, and there's probably times when I'm working when I don't want to be working because, I mean, I'm sure if we had our way, we'd never work. Um, but I feel like I'm able to choose when I work and get the things done when I need to get them done or want to get them done. And there is some, obviously some shift to that, but for the most part, I feel like I'm living my life, and that I think is what I want other people to learn and be able to do through my business. And so I think if I can do it and manage all the stuff that I have, then I definitely think it's something that other people can do too, whether they're an entrepreneur or whether they're just being part of their lives more.
Interesting.
But
Great.
yeah,
Again, great advice. Great message. Curious, what's next for the startup? I mean, what's sort of the coming up in the next couple of months that you're working on for it?
yeah, a lot. Quarter 4, if I can get the things done if the things fall into place, hopefully some big things will hit. I spent the past few months. So once What's the Big Idea ended, I I'll never forget this. I woke up that Monday morning and I was like, what just happened? And I was like, I don't know passwords for anything. I don't know. It was like this team just helped me have a business. And then I was like, I have no idea how to manage this. So the first few months of this year were really spent learning, and I ended up doing a lot of rebranding because in 48 hours you can't brand the way that I really truly wanted to brand the business. So I worked a lot on that side of it. Now that that's sort of underway, I've kind of been in the process of the last few months of um, the annual planner, which is the second of the two primary products. And that one, I'm still literally today texting with the printers to try to get that sorted out. So best case scenario, that will be ready for purchase before the end of the year. So for
Okay.
2018, I'll only do a short run. They'll be limited. So hopefully we'll sell all those out. And then I'm working on getting the origami sheet, the smaller product, in an e-commerce type system, getting that ready so people can start ordering the subscription boxes. And those will be really the big things that'll happen, actually getting the products out. And then just continue to do speaking around town. I've got a few clients that I work with on more of a consulting basis. And then hopefully a workshop that'll be local, time management workshop that will include one or two of the products.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to learn more about the solutions, what's the best way to do it? Website, I guess.
Yes, origamiday.com.
Okay.
And there's a page there where you can sign up for the newsletter. I only send my newsletter maybe once a month at most, and I kind of just send it when there's a message to send.
Right.
And I think people have mixed opinions about that. A lot of people in marketing will tell you be on and be on them, but I still have an open rate of 46%, so I'm going to stick with my
Wow.
plan.
Yeah, I think that's
So
avoiding that spam side. Yeah, I mean, share a message when there's a good enough message to share. I think again, you're being the nonconformist, but it sounds like it's paying off with that open rate.
well, and I think about what do I want? I don't need 400 emails a day about something that like you've already told me that 6 different ways. I get it. It's on sale. But I think like if I don't get it frequently, I want it. So I try to think about what do I want and what do I care about my time. And the less emails we get, the happier we all are. So, so people can sign up on the website and get that email, and then they can also see a demonstration. There's a great video
Okay.
to kind of help understand the primary product because it is a little bit of a weird one to explain. And then I do send a link with the email for a digital download, so someone can download the product if they're on the newsletter. And I'll do that for now. Eventually, I may take that away and just have it on the e-commerce option. But for now, I'd rather people use the product, so I'm happy to give it away.
Absolutely. Well, I'll be sure to link to everything in the show notes, and that way people can check it out
Awesome.
and hopefully support you when the annual planner's ready.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited for those.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Great message that people need to hear, and lots of good, interesting tips along the way. So thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great to see you.